Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back to Newcastle Fast FM. Here we are breaking into December. Subhanallah. Final month of the year, the Gregorian calendar, and it's been a cold start to what is going to be an end of quite a hectic and topsy-turvy year, to put it politely, I think. Um, Last week, we were discussing things around domestic violence, specifically for our sisters and the women. And I want to thank all of our viewers, all of our listeners, all those who jumped on board, mashallah. Salam Yasmin, salam Amal, salam, all of them popping up there, inshallah. We touched on, and your engagement, Jazakallah khair, was fantastic. It brought up a whole load of things. The depth of the discussion was quite intense. There was a lot of emotion, and rightfully so. It's that kind of thing. And I hope, inshallah, that all of you from that show took away something positive, something that was constructive, something that you were able to build on, and that whatever we discussed didn't affect you in an adverse kind of way, but that, inshallah, gave you some kind of self-awareness, some kind of empowerment. And subhanAllah, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us and guide us and bless us with only that which is best for us in the akhirah. Today we are going to continue that discussion, and we're going to tap into the other side of the sort of thing that does happen, and that men can also suffer from domestic violence as well. And this is something that, again, we're talking about a very small percentage that happens within our community, but nonetheless, it is happening. And it's something that does need to be raised. And I think some of the comments that we got through last week as well were asking this question, what about the men? And we didn't want to dilute last week's conversation. Assalamu alaikum, the rebirth sister, assalamu alaikum, Pasa. We wanted to ensure that discussion got as best as value we could give it in the space. And today we're going to explore that discussion a little bit further today, inshallah. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce Dr. Abdul Haqq. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.
And in that vein, inshallah, I pass it on to you, inshallah.
Thank you for that introduction. I think very important. And again, to the brothers and sisters who participated last week, and alhamdulillah, and those of you who contacted me and reached out afterwards, there was a lot of discussion, and sisters particularly contacting me following that, mashallah, via email and the like, because a lot of it resonated with them, alhamdulillah. And I say alhamdulillah not in the sense that, it's good it resonated, it's sad, but the fact that they were able to engage in that instance. And I felt that we should look at men can be victims too. And Wajid spoke about a particular element we will cover today, which we will do, but I want to broaden it as well in a societal context of how men are victims in other ways, but because of the type of society that we live in and the framework of where attention is paid to victims, men often are in the background in particular instances and don't come forward because of particular cultural backdrops, because of particular stigmas that are attached to being seen weak or perceived as a victim in that instance. So we're going to talk about the initial aspect, Wajid, that you mentioned, but to be broader on that. And I think it's important. Why? One of the things we've seen societally is that there are certain triggers and certain language that can be evoked, especially by women, okay, whereby the attention of the authorities, the police, the courts, the social services, whoever it may be from statutory services and bodies are alerted. And some women, not all, and I'm not talking about the genuine victims here, male or female, because we have those who have now subscribed or adapted that language of victimhood for the simple reason that it has some mileage for them now. So they will use that language knowing exactly the type of result that they are going to get from using that. And unfortunately, and in my time as chairman of Brixton Mosque and beyond that, even up until now, you hear of stories and you hear of brothers coming to you saying how they've lost custody of their children and have been demonized by their wives or ex-wives, as it may be. Social services are involved. They now have restraint orders on them. And some may say, well, there must be a reason. We're not talking about the legitimate, genuine cases where that is necessary. We're talking about cases where the woman then starts using, okay, the societal apparatus to achieve her objective. And on some occasions, it's spiteful. There's malice involved. On some occasions, it's I want to teach him a lesson. And some occasions, it's well, because the marriage or the relationship has ended acrimoniously, there's a teaching of a lesson. If it's in the Muslim faith, maybe the husband has taken a second wife. He's gone into polygyny in that instance. And the first marriage has broken down, or second, or whatever the case may be. But I've witnessed so often brothers losing custody of their children, and the story that's been there, and you've known the husband or the father to be a doting father. You've known the father to be one who's paid so much attention to his children. You've seen the bond, and you've heard about the bond of the father, and the children themselves have that bond with the father. And then what you'll see is confusion from those children as to the narrative they're hearing from the mother about the father, and the actions that they're seeing being taken in the distance that's being drawn between the father and his children is such that it conflicts with the child's experience and understanding of the love that they had with their father for him and him for them, and up until the split starts taking place. Now, I had a recent case where an individual contacted me, and I've always known him to be a very amiable, well-to-do, decent individual. And he sent me some of the statements that had been put forward by his ex-wife, who's now remarried, has got her children from him. And the way that those children were inculcated and poisoned against him. And he's not seen his children now for about 2 years, okay? And the language of the mother was all of these, and I've seen it because I've dealt with cases and having worked in the legal profession. You see particular language that triggers particular responses, as I've said, okay? Some of us may have experienced that ourselves. Some of us who've worked abroad as Muslims, and maybe marriages have broken down, and you'll have the woman say, he's going to kidnap my children. I've seen it in our parents' generations as well. If the father is from a different land from the mother, from the West Indies, from Africa, or whatever, the language is triggered. I fear that he's going to kidnap my son. He's become a Muslim. He's one of these Wahhabis, even though she may subscribe to exactly the same belief and everything, but now she's become a little bit more liberal, or plays up to the social worker or the court where she doesn't wear the hijab, but she used to wear it before and everything. The color changes. I'm not saying there's anything wrong in that. That may be a natural progression or change that's going on, but they play up for the authorities to garner that sympathy and support. And in the end, you see the male figure, the husband, then becomes demonized. And let's be clear again. I'm saying Wajid, and I want the participants, the viewers, to see. I'm not talking about the genuine cases where this should happen to the men because of what they've done. I'm talking about these cases where sisters, women, Muslim, non-Muslim, have seen where they can take advantage to achieve what they want to achieve, custody of the children. And if it's not even custody of the children, to make sure that the husband doesn't have any of the rights that he was afforded beforehand for whatever reason. If they want to see the husband, and I'll say in the case of a number of black converts, black men, non-Muslim men, who are in maybe mixed relationships with a white woman, with an Asian woman, this is particularly exacerbated even more. It may be a South Asian man married to a white woman, Muslim or non-Muslim, and the relationship breaks down. And that white woman can then use her privilege, her white privilege, and say, he's become more religious, and I fear that he's going to take my children off to Pakistan, Bangladesh, wherever it may be, and I fear him. In this instance, he's become more cultural, and he's imposing things on me. And the court listens to this. The social workers listen to this. They're making and taking these notes down. And no matter what protestation that husband gives, he's made a law-abiding citizen, always worked, always provided for the children. His voice is diminished in such a context. It's happened over and over again. So men become victims in that particular instance because the society is not geared towards their representation, their defense in that particular instance. And this is a reality, Wajid, that needs to be spoken about. As one of the sisters, I think Revert's sister said, it's very, very raw. Okay. Let me see. And how do you know that she is not telling the truth? Now, this is a good question, Jenna. We're not saying that she's not telling the truth. Those genuine cases we spoke about beforehand. And I'm not saying that everyone's lying. I'm talking about those cases where it's clear. You've even got female associates saying, I don't know why she's doing this. We will give witness and testimony that the father was not like this. You've got females who are saying this is wrong, what's been done. They're advising the woman. But those who they want to move in a particular pathway, they want to get a particular element of support from the authorities, from the social services. So therefore, they know what language to use to trigger that support. And in actuality, those types of women, and they're a minority, inshallah, are not victims at all. They're not victims at all, but they know through their nature, their gender, what they need to trigger to get the support and the results that they want to get. This is a reality.
Yeah. Just quickly, salam to Sister Sai, Bea, Sharan, Malakat, Lala Rok, Jenna as well. And Sister Jenna, what would say is look at our show from last week where we did talk about domestic violence that was directed towards women. What we're talking about specifically is a very small minority within that segment of what happens towards men and how that can be flipped on its head. And I think one of the things that that the sisters highlighted there is kind of what my question was leading to as well, Dr. Abdul Haqq, is that from a services perspective, when this situation arrives at your door, you must believe it. You can't be dismissive of it, because if you are, it could escalate, and God forbid, it ends up in a very, very very serious or even a mortal threat to an individual. And we've seen that before, right? We've seen how sometimes the services have ignored, police have ignored, they've not taken the threat of the partner, whatever it is, seriously, and that's just accumulated into physical mortal harm to individuals. So from that perspective, then obviously they know what they have to do. They have to initiate certain things to make sure there's a safeguarding policies are all put into place, and that whoever is there at risk is removed from that risk, and that's what you'd expect in any sort of decent kind of process.
That's understandable. That's very understandable.
What we're talking about is when that process is initiated, when it didn't need to be initiated, when it didn't need to be, in the sense that it's been dealt with or it's been brought to the fore because of, like you said, it's been brought to either take advantage of a certain scenario. It's either to put somebody at a complete disadvantage because you want to do a thing a particular way. And that whole shift, though, but the impact of that, again, like you said, there's one thing when a child sees the father, the parent acting in an aggressive way, and the child recognizes, okay, so there's something wrong. So when the shift changes, they know that mum's kind of done the right thing. All right, they might miss their dad for moments or whatever, but mum's done the right thing. But in that own situation, when they haven't seen any of that, they can testify that it hasn't happened. Like you said, there are those individuals that are not like that. But then suddenly the situation shifts, and then mum starts telling them, when the services start telling them that your dad's a bad man. It's massive impact.
And just as I think Sai Queen, if that question can be put back up, she mentioned something. Would it be accurate that women use men or abuse them when they don't live up to her expectations on how a man should be or act? This has happened on occasions when the man hasn't lived up to the expectation that the woman had of him, okay? And then she would do anything. Men do it as well, but as we said, we spoke about this last week. Okay, but the woman then moves and orchestrates particular things so that she could either get out of this relationship, and at the most acute and severe end, she's going to do something that's going to harm him and his relationship with his children, just so she can achieve that objective that she wants. And I'll give you an example. You're saying, as was asked, how do you know that she's not telling the truth? Look, I'm going to give some anecdotal evidence of cases that I know about, okay?
These just so we're framing this, Dr. Abdul Haqq, these are because for myself, I've had no experience of this other than stuff that I've read, understanding from an abstract point of view, policies and procedures, all of those sort of things. Salam, Sister Shabnam. And that's my perspective. So what you're going to give us is real life examples that you've actually experienced firsthand.
Or not firsthand, or if people have come to me and I've seen and had them, and that's Walaikum Salam, Sister Shabnam, and as she's mentioned, and I'm really glad that I'm really glad that sisters are engaging with this, and this shows that they do understand that as Sister Shabnam's saying here, unfortunately there are some women who will manipulate a situation. These are complete reality. So let's be just, because a lot of the time I got very passionate last week when speaking about domestic violence and women, and I don't want to go into that again today because I'll get even more passionate, because I really resent men who do that. Okay, and inshallah, we are not of those people. But the point is now, when we're talking about this topic, you'll always see a lot of women will come in and start coming from a defensive perspective, and that's another thing these type of women get garner support from, because they know they will get that sympathy. They will cry wolf. They will shed crocodile tears. We're not talking about the sincere cases. So let's say, for example, there's an example that I know. A relationship was breaking down, and it was clear when that relationship was breaking down that the woman wanted to get back, or she had some childhood sweetheart who was coming out of jail. She wanted to be back with this childhood sweetheart. The ex-husband realizes that, or finds out, remembers this guy was in for a long time, was a drug dealer and a heavy drug addict, and is antipsychotic. And he finds out from individuals who work in the services that this individual shouldn't be near children. But somehow he's connected with his ex-wife. And
sorry, do you mean he was psychotic? He was on sort of antipsychotic meds?
He still remained, when he came out of prison all those years later, for heroin charges and everything like this, was still on an antipsychotic drugs to keep down the addiction and the behavior, the related associated behavior that came with it.
Right.
So the husband, hearing about that, warned the family, if that man comes anywhere near my children, it's going to kick off. Okay, rightly so. He doesn't want that and even the extended family was like, yep, it happened, and we removed the children and we put them into a safe area, and we said to the sister, what are you doing? Are you nuts? He's not well, and everything like that. So the family got involved and did that to shield the children. Okay, that's the thing. But what did the sister do in that instance? What was reported to me? She did the sympathy card, and the ex threatened me. Okay, and what happened? Called the police. The police suddenly, who's the individual? Spoke about the individual's background, everything like that. They went looking for him, surrounded the mother's home, the family home, armed police, there, everything. Where is he? We need to see him, just because he made it clear that I don't want my children in such company. Now, let's fast forward. That sympathy was given. The whole narrative of the ex-husband being this way, that way, demonization and everything took place. To the extent that the woman got back with this individual, very happy, got her children, left her children with her mother, moved in with this individual. Within a week, she was back home. Okay, these kids are calling their father, distraught. What's happened? Are you okay? The mother's returned, black and blue, beaten black and blue by this individual that she'd orchestrated all of this for. And the children are seeing that. And yet they've never witnessed that in the whole time that the husband, the father and the mother's been married. Then that escalates. Remember, the language is being used, even, and this is a convert, these are both converts, even being used in Sharia courts and writing the right language and everything like this, and just to pull. And I'm going to talk about the Sharia court and cultural relationships again very shortly. Even get in every sphere, making sure the victim narrative suited this individual. The demonization narrative was against the ex-husband, despite the children not seeing that. Okay, What did this culminate into? Let's look at this. What did it culminate into? When that violent incident happened, and she wouldn't return back to the marital home, if you want.
This is after she's been
beaten up. Yeah, a week into the marriage. A week into the marriage. Okay.
And she's gone back to her mum's house where the kids are.
Gone back to her mum's house, which is selfish because this individual, psychotic, is now issuing threats. Okay, issuing threats that extended to the children. Okay, one of the young children is on the bus. He sees the car following the bus, and he's petrified now. He doesn't know what to do. He's 11 years old, 12 years old. This is happening now. So imagine the father's been demonized now because he said, if anything happens to the children, this is what's going to happen. But he can't do anything now because if he does anything, it's all going to fit that narrative that she's pushed out there. Okay. What does it culminate into? And we're going right up to lockdown, beginning or mid into lockdown. Windows smashed. Someone's climbing through the window. It's this individual looking for this estranged wife who's not coming home, okay? And he's coming to try and kill her. And he starts slashing and stabbing left, right, and center with the children running out into the street. The older son comes out of the bedroom, realizes what's going on, and overpowers him. He gets stabbed in his thigh. There's blood everywhere and everything because he sees this individual's trying to kill his mum. Who orchestrated all of that? Who put them in that situation? Who gave that narrative to place themselves in that situation? And you might say this is an extreme case. I'll bring another case that goes further back. And I'm going to be really general because some will know these cases, okay? Another individual, we're going a few years ago now. Estranged, the sister's not happy in her relationship. This is a cultural relationship now. She's not happy in her relationship any longer. She starts behaving in ways that are untoward with contact with other people and all sorts of things like this. The marriage breaks down, okay? She continues to pursue the life that she wants to pursue, and he's going with the life that he wants to go with, but there's a stereotype of black brother, look at him, this, uncaring and everything like that. To cut a long story short, because this individual wanted to pursue the lifestyle that she wanted to, Muslim, cut a long story short, not long later, she was murdered by one of the individual that she pursued, the boyfriend that she liked. Now, these are extreme cases that I'm giving you, but to say, wind it back now from those extreme spectrums. But when the narrative is used against men in that way, and the men, even if they can represent themselves and articulate themselves very, very well. The question was asked by a sister, how do you know that the woman's not telling the truth? So when is the man, let me ask this question back to the sister who asked that question. When is the man ever believed in these circumstances, in these contexts of estrangement? When is he ever believed? When that victim narrative has got ahead of him and all the right words and all the right things are being said? When does he get listened to? And mashallah, B. Raja, thank you. What Brother Abdul Haqq is saying is very accurate. Unfortunately, there are some very vindictive women out there who will use particularly children as a tool to hurt the ex. This is what I'm talking. Thank you very much for this. And those of you who are being really open and transparent, don't get me wrong. As I said, last week you saw me very angry about how the men behave. But I'm going to question the women who are doing this. And I'm going to question the women who are ready to jump in with their fellow sisters. And we are women and we're in it together. And they're seeing, well, okay, we're going to believe every narrative of this woman because she's crying, she looks scared, she's afraid. And when the man's giving the narrative saying, where's this coming from? I just want to see my kids. Yeah, the relationship's over. I'm not fighting about that. I want to see my kids. Or you can't come anywhere near the home. We've heard that you were violent. She's scared of you. Ask the children. No, we've never seen anything like that. But then what you'll see, like in the first case I started with, that the sister married again, the children became attached to the stepfather, and the narrative between the two of them, I think your husband, ex-husband's really bad. Your father was a wicked man. Your father was such and such. Showing the stepfather showing so much love to the children, seeing how happy the mother is now, so they're going to gravitate towards this new happy union. That doesn't always happen because some of the children will not accept it. No, I love my dad. I'm not drawing closer to any stepfather. Yes, that does happen. So my thing is that victim card that non-victims play are so devastating and destructive to the man that when he then falls into that stereotype, he becomes angry. On one occasion, the father went to the police station. He said, I want to go and get my kids. We're traveling back. And I know that the ex-wife, she's moved them from where I know they are. And there's a problem with that. The policeman looked. The brother explained this. The policeman looked and said, because he saw it as a man complaint, he said, look, we're really busy. You're going to have to wait 2 hours, and we're probably not going to do anything anyway. Okay. The brother and I had a conversation. I said, if you went and kicked off violently now, you'd have police cars, everything around at the drop of a hat. Cases going back, Wajid going back, cases going back. When there's been domestic disputes with the brothers and stuff like this, I saw this as chairman in Brixton. And the brother's taken his children just to go to a walk to the park, okay? Going for a walk, I want to get out and everything like this. And he's going to pick up his other child from school. And what did the mother's done? Called the police. I don't know what he's going to do. He was mad. He's taken my little children. The police went to the school of the other child, took the child out of the school, told her, we're just taking you with us, we want to take you. Took her to the police station. And then they were looking everywhere for the husband. And it was just an argument that they'd had. It was just an argument. So what I'm saying is when that happens, that they just have to, it's like they light a fuse and the system jumps in for them. But if the husband now was to say, listen, the wife has gone out with the children, she's not in her right state of mind, she's been issuing all sorts of threats, like she's going to burn my car and she's going to stab me while I sleep and everything. Do you think the police are going to be concerned about that? Do you think the social services, if you take it to court and say, I want custody of my children, this woman's been violent and aggressive to me, do you think it's going to be listened into in the same way and have the same weight as if it was the woman who was making such complaints? Absolutely not.
I mean, I don't think it would have the same weight. And I think you're right that the system is kind of designed to work in one particular way. There was a sister, Russia, who just put up there that, you know, within the US, and that's it, I guess in US and Europe, women have more rights in the law more than men. That's why men can be victims easily. I don't know if it's more rights than men, but I think the law is kind of set up, the systems are set up in a particular way when it comes to those safeguarding issues. And I think but we see this all the time, don't we? Whether we look at even, so as Sister Shabnam there, as a woman, to believe a woman immediately without giving the benefit of the doubt to a man is unjust. But it's also kind of natural, though, as well, isn't it, Dr. Abdul Haqq, to naturally gravitate towards somebody who's of the same gender, who sort of says, you know what, this is going on with me, I've got these issues. And like you said, you know, it becomes a really difficult thing to put somebody in that situation on the spot as well, you know.
Very true, but then what we've got to look at, though, we are Muslims, and we've got to look at being just, okay? We need to look at being just in this issue, even though the knee-jerk reaction is there. Even the men, when the men come and complain like, my wife has done this or my ex-wife has done that, and they're really, really annoyed, and you're like, yeah, that's wrong if the sister's done that. Take a second wife, brother, or you know what, I would do such and such. Go and get your... That knee-jerk response, we all do it. Even us as men, when we hear women come to us with some of the complaints and the pain that they're going through, our nature is to incline towards them, like, are you going through that? And you want to shelter and you want to shield them. That's fine. That's fine to have those feelings, but then we need to check ourselves. We need to check ourselves and say, hold on a minute. Like the Prophet ﷺ spoke about, someone can be eloquent in speech and win him over in that particular instance. We've got to be very, very careful, especially in a society where we know this can take place. And as Sister Shabna says, it has the potential. It has ruined reputations. It's ruined and damaged friendships.
Yeah, but it's more than just that, isn't it? Like if you've got somebody who works in a particular type of situations, places, you know, once you have that on your record, that's it. That particular part of your career is just gone. You know, it's a whole different thing as well. And Jazakallah khair, assalamu alaikum to Kemal and what Sister Maryam was saying about that. It does kind of need to be discussed, but it does kind of, like you said, it does need our sisters to kind of speak up and sort of say, actually, yeah, you know, when this is happening, we know particularly that it's not a possibility, that it needs to be said. Not because it's not a gender war.
No, it isn't.
It's about, like you said, it's about being just. You know.
That's right. That's right.
Getting that balance right. And like you said, you know, if a relation's broken down, it's not a one-way thing. It might not be. I don't know. Allah knows best. But it you know, it kind of takes two to make that happen. You know, to work, it kind of takes two to go the other way as well. So these things, you know, they start off, they're always very complex, but it doesn't need to go to this level.
But then you're right, but then check this now. Those cases that I've given you, you'd think that the mistakes that men make mistakes when they go into other relationships or whatever, they divorce and they go into another relationship. But you'd think from those mistakes, it shows that partly it's the woman who has this is self-inflicted. And the children see that, well, hold on a minute, this wasn't like this when you was married to our father, okay? And now you're falling into this problem and that problem, and the violence from this. But then what happens? That network around that sister who's now gone into that case of the one who's now in remand and having broken through, tried to stab her to death and whatever. You'd think that they'd say, sister, don't you think you need to take a look at yourself in this instance? No. They would then say, the effects of the first relationship have damaged her judgment so much that she can't think straight, and this is why this has happened. Still, the support remains for these women who are making these decisions, getting validated from other sisters, no matter how far down the line it is. And then what you have, if you have some women who's like, yeah, I just hate men. They're not looking at, like, the common denominator in this is my friend, is this sister. The judgment call she's making, the same victim narrative that she's making to the police, to everyone else. The police certainly may say, hold on, she said this before, and she's saying it here, and she's saying it here. There are patterns, but sometimes when you're making taking that victim stance amongst a particular cohort of sisters who are blind to your own behavior, that just worsens and furthers and perpetuates that false victim mentality. But then it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, because you are literally a victim now to violence from the later choices that you've actually made. So Sister Mariam said it's all the fault of feminism. There, just on that point, if you can take the rest of the question, and then we come back to that. But that there is an element of that now, where you can see that elements of the deen, and I'm not talking elements of the deen don't include misogyny. Let's be clear on this. Misogyny has no place in anything, society or anyway. And men who have mistaken and confused misogyny for deen, or cite deen to justify misogyny, they've got it twisted, they've got it completely wrong. They need to fear Allah. And we need to check ourselves sometimes as well. Yes, there's patriarchy, and there are some issues with patriarchy as well. But what you'll find now is that women who are adopting a Western understanding of feminism, okay, they're diminishing any sort of role. And you've seen men, I know brothers, I know a particular brother said to me, what I've learned to do is just keep quiet, let my wife and the women of her family, because it's predominantly women, say what they want to say, because this is the only way I will keep the relationship going. And when I've seen this individual, he's a shadow of himself. Now, I'm not saying he was this macho man and everything like this or whatever, but he was an individual who's like, okay, I know my role in society. I know my role as a husband, as a partner, and everything like that. So even having that balance and equilibrium with his wife, then it was like, no, she wanted to be the decision maker. She wanted to be the one to say, well, and I'm not saying women can't be decision makers. Please don't take this the wrong way. But what I'm saying, when you diminish, you want your husband's role diminished to such an extent that he's a shadow of himself, and then you become disappointed in how he is, because you realize, I want someone who can stand up and everything, but you've diminished his role, and he's sadly gone into that particular position just so that he can maintain the relationship. And there are cases, and I was looking up some today, in non-Muslim societies where men have done that to such an extent that the woman has become the aggressor. The aggressor, she will actually physically assault her husband, who's stronger than her, but he won't respond. He won't retaliate, because the moment he gives this, you want to do this, don't you? See, I know you've got that in you. And I've got a case on my screen now where the individual was literally said he was in a living hell because he held back to the point that he was being oppressed emotionally, psychologically, physically. He could have retaliated, but just that once, the whole thing would have flipped. The victim status would have flipped completely until he sought help to get away from it, and the trauma and the mental health issues that ensued after that were quite profound. This is a non-Muslim case that I repeat that was taking place. So what I'm saying here is, sisters, we need to look at this, and we need to look at the cases that are genuine and know how to discern those and differentiate those away from those sisters, those women who know I can use the system. I just have to cry wolf and I'm going to have exactly what I want. And when it starts affecting the children, this is another thing. And I want to move Wajid into a microcosmic sort of community element now, which has happened when I was chairman of Brixton Mosque, and I was witnessing this happening increasingly up and down the country and in these cultural marriages. So you'd have a black brother, mashallah, tabarakallah, convert, married to a South Asian sister. And the relationship, when it's broken down and they go to the Sharia councils that were there, which are predominantly South Asian in themselves, what you would see is that attention was being paid and empathy was being given to the sister. Now, I'm not saying the sister was acting a victim now. I'm not going to speak about the sister in this particular instance. I'm going to talk about the mindset culturally of the Sharia councils, some of these Sharia councils. So what would happen, they would see that this woman is from the same cultural backdrop as they are, okay? And you will see and detect a frowning upon that union in the first instance. And in a majority of the cases, there were no efforts of the Sharia council for reconciliation, to say try and to go to work on it. There was advice that, okay, yes, you should part, you should divorce and everything like this. However, when you juxtapose that beside cultural relationships, and I'm talking from watching this and having brothers and sisters come to me, including South Asian sisters who say, we weren't told to have arbitration between my black husband and me. It was just, okay, you should separate and you should divorce. But when it was two Pakistanis, two Bangladeshis, two South Asian couples, the efforts of the Sharia council to reconcile, come back in 6 weeks, no, you cannot divorce. You know, this is frowned upon in our culture. This should not be happening. Let's call your parents in. The efforts to keep that couple together from the same cultural backdrop, the same ethnicity, was, I would say, as much as 10 times more in effort than when it was a mixed cultural relationship. And so many black converts, men, would come back and say, yeah, the Sharia council basically said, yeah, you two should divorce and like that, and the sister should go back to a relationship, and the brother was just left. That's what happens in the Deen, brother. But when two Pakistanis, two South Asians, two Bangladeshis came, the efforts went on for months, if not more than a year, with the Sharia council.
I think it just comes back to what you said before, and you know, the sisters, one of the sisters mentioned it, I think it was Sister Miriam, talking about that support network of having that kind of bubble that allows a idea to perpetuate within there without it being really challenged and opened out. And I think, as you sort of highlighted there, when it comes to that sort of cultural bias, I think, well, somebody else has put that up on there, and one of the sisters mentioned that, one of the brothers possibly, that, you know, that you have this cultural bias that says, and we've all got it, you know, that that unconscious bias that sets in, that, well, you know what, it was never bound to work anyway, but they look kind of the same tone, so that should definitely work, you know, irrespective of how menacing the partner.
But then transfer that. There's the cultural bias, and Jazakallah khair, Sister Shabnam, for highlighting that. That's a very good point. But there's also an ethnic racism that is pervasive,
which comes under that unconscious bias. That's what I kind of meant by that, is that, like you see these two people of two different colors, like, well, yeah, that's never going to work, because you haven't even really given it the same thought. Like if you looked at it with your eyes closed, which isn't looking at all, but you know what I mean. Yeah, if you arrived at that situation with your eyes closed and you listened to what was going on, you'd approach it possibly with a whole different perspective.
And yeah, as Jenna said, they didn't want that couple together in the first place. So when it comes to this thing now, to okay, do you know what? We need to end it. But this is the point now. Then that sister, and I'm not saying now in this instance that the sister has orchestrated, done the victim thing and everything, but then she becomes frowned upon and shunned upon and unmarriable in her own South Asian community because of the stigma of being married to a black brother. Okay, and the Sharia Council know that. So what are they doing in that instance in not trying to reconcile in that particular instance, but they're ready to make that effort with two from the same ethnic background? This is unjust. And again, as I said, we're talking about men can be victims too. So where does that leave the convert? Where does that leave him in the wider community? Where does that leave him with mental health issues? And when we're looking, and not just black brothers now, when we're talking about men with mental health issues in that instance, and when we look at the deaths of individuals, especially black people in police custody, there's a lack of understanding that their fear or their agitation or their response may be due to underlying mental health issues in that particular instance. And that's not understood. And then also, this is the thing that happens now. Some women know this. So when they say, look, I speak, I'm very gesticulative when I speak. Okay, that's just how I am. Okay, and some will say we like that. But you don't like it, you can then translate, he's got two rings on, one looks like a knuckle duster. I was threatened by him. His voice was raised. He was very passionate. And then in the police's mind, she's in danger. She's in danger. And yes, sister, reverse sister, double discrimination, what I call the double whammy effect. And when a sister does that, and this is the thing, black sisters don't do that to their fellow ethnicity. MashaAllah, South Asian sisters don't do it that often. It's been done. I've seen it done with their black partner. I'm not saying it's just a purview of white women. I'm not saying that. And it happens to Asian men as well. The woman might not be highlighting her privilege, but it will be looked upon by those of the predominant culture to say, this is a white woman in a foreign religion. We have a perception that religion oppresses her. We need to come to her rescue because she's of the fairer skin, because she's of the fairer sex in that instance. So this is something that you can't say blame the woman for in that particular instance, but that's the advantage that she has in a mixed relationship, be it with a black husband, be it with a South Asian husband, and she's an English white sister in that particular instance. As I said, she may not be playing up to that, but that's an advantage that is there unconsciously. So in that instance, the man who's looked at as the perpetrator, the one who's looked at as the brute, as the oppressor, he automatically, by default, is a victim to the system because of how he's going to be dealt with, the disadvantage he's going to be handled with in that particular instance. So that's another thing that we need to be aware of in these circumstances. This is why justice is so important. The woman, she may be going through pain of a divorce or whatever, but the moment she starts speaking the language of oppression, of victimhood, and she knows it's not that, she's automatically cast him as a villain. But in actuality, he's become a victim without a voice, who's not going to be believed, who's going to be marginalized, who's going to be stigmatized, who's going to have social worker reports put before the court, and that's going to stick with him. And when his career, even his profession, if he's in a good profession, as one of the sisters mentioned, it could damage reputations. They will start believing the official reports. So I said, well, it's official. The social workers would have, I'm sure they would have seen this. You spoke with them. And you might say, well, yeah, you get the opportunity to have your day with the social worker and speak with the social worker. Those who've done that, and alhamdulillah, I've never been in that situation. Those who've done that know that the social worker, while they may be attentive and they're listening, I've worked in the legal profession. Their reports are always so open-ended regarding the man against who the accusations are made that you come to the conclusion that, yeah, there's credibility to what the woman is alleging. There's never any doubt or aspersion cast on her narrative. And while you might say, well, then they haven't cast it on the man's, but it's what they haven't said and the absence of affirmation of his narrative, of his statement, that leads you to the conclusion that, yeah, there's no smoke without fire. There's something going on here. And we need to look at him very carefully. He's a slick individual whose statement, we can't identify anything, but we should be wary, because this wouldn't have come to court. She wouldn't have brought this claim if there was nothing.
Yeah, and I think that, again, just kind of unpick that a little bit, because you may have a scenario where the woman is stuck and the only way out is this way, because like we discussed last week,
absolutely,
she's knocked on the community's door, she's knocked on whatever leadership potentially could have been there to help her. None of those doors have opened, and so look, if this is the only way I'm going to get out, this is the only way I'm going to be safe, this is only my children are going to be safe. But what you're talking about is not having that stress, not having that situation, not having that extreme duress, to put it politely, but actually just thinking, you know what, I've had enough of this. I'm just going to push this button here, and it's all situation. Go and boom, I'm straight out of the chute.
Exactly. Exactly. I fear for my life from him. Okay, that means I'm going to get sheltered accommodation. I'm going to get my own home and everything like that. I don't want him to see the children, so I'm going to make sure that they put restrictions on him visiting. And you tap all of those buttons, and then okay, he might get visiting rights where they meet in a neutral place, and he's sitting in this room like a goldfish bowl, sitting with his children. Which one of us can say that's a natural environment to interact with our children? But that's all he's got left now because of the picture that's been painted concerning him. The genuine case that you mentioned, absolutely. Any sisters that's going through that and whatever, I will support you. I'll be there beside you. I'll be prepared to be a buffer like I have been with the ex-husband, to say, no, you're not doing this. Her case is genuine, and not only is she going down this road, we're backing her. So you've got to come up against us. You saw last week I spoke about that. But the latter case you're giving, the latter example that you're referring to, that happens. And we've seen it happen a number of times. It's not on the same scale, I believe, as the genuine cases that we've been speaking about last week and highlighted today to some degree, but it exists and it's devastating. And the ex-husband, the father, is left in no man's land. No man's land. And this can't be right. The brothers that I've spoken to, and remember, some brothers do get pushed to, right, you know what, I'm going to live up to this, and if I can't see my children, I am going to kick off. They might go after the new husband or whatever. Don't touch my child. And then what happens, as I said, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. They've had enough, they've held it down, they explode. And then what does she say? See?
That's what it's like.
See?
Yeah.
Knowing that what she's saying is he was never like this before, and they may, some even may have satisfaction in seeing, yeah, this some warped understanding. He must still care for me to that extent that I've been able to destroy him. I've been able to get.
It kind of reminds me of a. There's a lady I know, a couple of people I know actually, a man as well, non-Muslim, but their parents mixed race. And you know, he talked about how his white mother, how much abuse she would get from the community back in the 60s for having a black husband eventually, and having a mixed race child, and the amount of abuse she used to get just from walking down the street from like just random people. And I think, there's all sorts of stresses and strains on the relationship. But, he said their parents, they worked it out and they worked together and they
Alhamdulillah.
together, alhamdulillah, and there's all sorts of these kind of challenges that come, but there has to be that kind of, the whole purpose for being in a relationship, the whole purpose for marriage, it has to be there from a sincere perspective.
Right.
And it's not a novelty, it's not a flying fancy. It's something that is going to impact you. Well, even if you don't have kids, when you separate like that, it impacts you. We see it. I mean, the whole media is full of separation stories, right?
Right.
Like this tune or this film or whatever. That's all it's about. It's all about the impact of relationships. And I think, we don't really think about, or maybe there needs to be more responsibility before we get into these kind of relationships. And now, like you said, putting aside people who have those mental health issues and so on and so forth, but there still needs to be that kind of accountability and responsibility for people before they come together on these things.
And that's a good. Jenna asked who would want to destroy their ex. Many want to do it. Sometimes I felt anger. I'm like, I feel really annoyed that you've invested so much time and not destroy physically or whatever. But those, as we know, there's that song. There's a thin line between love and hate. And I think those of us, we can, even with our spouses, you get into an argument and like, I really resent her at this moment. I really resent him at this particular moment in time. But then when you now go down that path to, I'm going to ruin his chances with his children. I'm going to make sure he's demonized in society's eyes so that I can get some satisfaction, or I can get to where I need to get to, and his career, his life is ended as we know it. Not suicide, but it's destroyed. This relationship he's had with his children is destroyed. It's been tarnished. I'm going to marry someone else, and whilst that's their father, I'm going to let them see this man makes me happy, and who makes me happy, I want them to be happy with. To the extent that some even do this, which you're not supposed to do. You're supposed to call them by their father. They're calling the stepfather Abby, my father. I know brothers who can't fathom that. So having dealt with these cases, and brothers before would say, Abdul, you're always siding with the women. When I was chairman of Brixton Mosque, and I've got sisters that I'm wakil for, you're always siding with the women, you're always siding with the women. And that's because the majority of the cases were genuine cases I needed to side with them. But I cannot ignore the genuine cases of those men who've had this type of treatment. And if you see them now, and some switch off and say, this is what they've done, I'm going to go elsewhere, marry and start a life again. They don't see the children from that marriage anymore because they've been totally disconnected and detached from them. And then again, the mother then says to her children, you see, where's your father now? Where's your father now? She doesn't say, I caused this. I contributed to this. I made it so difficult that he couldn't see you. She doesn't say that to her children. She says, look, where's your father now? Look, see, he's gone and started another life with other children. He didn't really care about you. This is why I did what I did. Yeah. Self-perpetuating.
Just as we sort of head towards the last few minutes, because I think it's the impact that these specific cases have on the bigger picture as well.
Yes.
And like if you look at the situation now with the current president of America and the amount of cases that have been brought against him, and each one of them is basically slandered, brought into disrepute, called a liar, called just somebody as an attention seeker, and so on and so forth. And what happens is with these scenarios, and like you said, there are very few of them in that situation, but nonetheless, because generally, it's challenging enough when there's a woman raising these issues, it has a wider impact that then affects the bigger picture. Because then, as soon as you have, somebody mentioned before, Johnny Depp was in the news for it as well recently. When you have someone of that situation stepping into, being brought into account, it's not taken seriously. It's all of those very minor, not very minor, but those very minute samples of situations where it has been manipulated into that, are just brought to be the norm.
Right.
And norm is now affecting the general civil rights of the women.
Exactly. And the thing is, what we've got to look at, when is it, we know, all of us know the story of the boy who cried wolf, okay? But in this circumstance, the woman can cry wolf over and over and over again and be believed every single time. And this is the problem, because you've got the genuine ones and you've got the non-genuine ones. You've got to be able to separate the wheat from the chaff. And those who are doing that, those women who are doing that, and therefore making it more difficult for the genuine cases, they've got to be called out. They've got to be highlighted for who they are. Because when some of us see that case, we may not be just. We may say, you know what, see how these women are. And a genuine case comes, and it's a really abhorrent one, and you think, no, she's making that up. She just wants to say, and you've got this charming husband who sheds tears, and I just want to be with my kids. And like, see, here's another one. But actually, the sister is genuine in this case. So but it's been obscured. It's been obscured by these insincere cases, these crying wolf individuals who have jumped into that cohort of genuine cases and tainted it, caused doubt. And this is a major problem, because those sisters whose cases are genuine, they need the attention, every bit of attention that can be given, the moment that they come seeking that assistance. They need that. That needs to be clear. So what we're talking about today, we need to highlight and be careful of those sisters crying wolf and aligning themselves with the genuine cases.
Because it has a huge impact. And like you said, in certain cultures and societies, the impact of this resonates further. Like you said, within some cultures, they don't remarry. The woman will never remarry. The guy will, but the woman never does, and so on and so forth. And also, when they've had children, it's a whole different stigma that can be within certain communities again. So I think it's about, like somebody mentioned before on the comments, is that it's about fearing Allah, that we kind of forget ourselves, we lose ourselves, and the shaitan loves nothing more than to come between a husband and a spouse. That is his greatest ever achievement, and he prides himself on that, and he lauds those that do come between the husband.
That's the only time that Iblis gets off his throne. The only time he gets off his throne is when a shaitan comes to him and says, I separated a man from his wife. Okay, a wife from her husband. He gets up and embraces him, and he says, now this is the one. He says to the other shaitan, this is the one who's been successful. So we know in the Surah Baqarah that Harut and Marut came to test the people, and what was it with? Separating a man from his wife in this particular instance. So how much this is going to happen? Divorce does happen. It happens. This is a way of life and everything. But when you are manipulating it to demonize the other party, whether it's the man doing that with the woman, which is not always that successful unless he's a celebrity. You've mentioned Trump in that instance there. And yes, if somebody's powerful and the way they denigrate the women and marginalize them and everything, that's abhorrent. And maybe that's another thing that we should talk about another time. But when the woman is doing this and she's shielding herself under that umbrella of victimhood with other victims, knowing she is not of that ilk, this is a travesty. This is a wrongdoing on the part of that sister. And those who know sisters doing that because they don't like the husband, or he's not, or ex-husband, and maybe he's a bit coarse, or he's a personality, or they just don't like him, so they're going to side with the sister, but they know that what she's doing is wrong. If you can't chastise her, don't support her in this. Don't support her in this, because you're conflating and obscuring the genuine cases, and that individual, that man who's a victim in that particular instance there, you're doing a disservice and injustice to him as well.
Yeah, astaghfirullah. I think on that note, actually, I think it's a perfect place, alhamdulillah, from a time perspective, inshallah ta'ala. Just want to thank all of you for your comments. They've been flying through. Jazakallah khair. Thank you very, very kindly for tuning in again. A very real and challenging topic. And alhamdulillah, That's what we're doing here at Newcastle Fast FM, is bringing these discussions to you, inshallah, from a sincere place, not from an objective and a place from the other side of a telescope. We're talking about real community issues, real community challenges, and real difficulties that we as an ummah are facing, and that we need to uphold ourselves to a better standard, to a higher standard, but also to a standard that is, inshallah, gonna, inshallah, benefit ourselves, our children, our ummah, inshallah, and to be from amongst those whom Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accepts.
And that verse from Sister Amal is the perfect one if you want to read it to end. Jazakallah khair, Sister Amal. That's a perfect verse to end.
And one of his signs that he has created from you spouses from amongst yourselves, so that you may find comfort in them. And it's such a beautiful word and such a beautiful understanding for those who have a healthy and loving relationship. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless all of you with that which is best for you and which is right for you, inshallah, and that which is gives you the partners that become your garments and you become like garments for them, and that you are indeed, inshallah, fulfilling half of your iman, that you have purified it and you are complete in that, inshallah, and that, inshallah, that Jannah is being paved for you as easier than your mind can ever imagine, inshallah. And I just want to say Jazakallah khair for all of you again. Thank you very much. Thank you all, Stamal, and all of my other sisters and brothers there. But a lot of my sisters, Jazakallah khair, thank you so much, because this topic is challenging. It's difficult. And it's not about mansplaining it. It's about putting the real thing on the table. And let's have a look at it as a collective, as an ummah from all over the world, mashallah. South Africa today, Canada, America, mashallah, tabarakallah. May Allah accept it from us. And from that note, inshallah, I just want to say Jazakallah khair again to Dr. Abdul Haqq for your transparent and real conversation. And inshallah ta'ala, we will be back with you next Monday, inshallah. And we look forward to hosting you here on Newcastle Fast FM. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.